The rain outside was coming down hard, making streaks on the cafe window. Inside, the dim lights made everything feel a bit blurry, like a dream. He sat there, a man dressed in a sharp suit, watching a woman across the room. Her laugh, a bright, clear sound, cut through the quiet hum of the cafe. It was a laugh he remembered, a sound that used to be just for him. Now, it was for someone else. Beside her, a little boy, maybe 5 years old, was drawing intensely. The man watched them. The boy held up his drawing, a messy explosion of colors, and pointed at it. He said something to the woman, and she smiled, that same bright smile, and ruffled his hair. The man's eyes narrowed. He heard the boy's small, clear voice say, "Mommy." It hit him hard, a dull ache in his chest. Then the boy looked up, his innocent gaze sweeping the room, and his finger, small and curious, pointed right at him. "Daddy," the boy exclaimed, his voice ringing out in the suddenly silent cafe. The man's perfectly still face twitched. For a split second, a raw, exposed feeling flashed in his eyes, a crack in his usual calm. He was Jae-hoon, a name that made people in this city's Korean underworld either bow their heads or cross the street, but right now, he was just a man whose carefully built composure had just taken a hit. Slowly, deliberately, he rose from his seat. His usual intimidating aura was still there, but mixed with a chilling stillness. Every eye in the cafe seemed to follow him as he walked towards their table. His gaze was fixed, first on the small boy, then on the woman whose face had gone completely white. He didn't say a word, but his silence was louder than any shout. It hung in the air, heavy and full of unspoken things. He reached their table, his movements precise. Without breaking his intense stare, he placed something down. It was a single black rose, its petals dark and velvety against the light wood. It looked beautiful, but it also felt menacing, a silent message that was both a claim and a warning. The woman's eyes were wide, filled with a mix of fear and a flicker of something defiant. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at the rose, then at him. Jae-hoon turned to leave, his steps slow and measured, each one a punctuation mark in the heavy silence. As he reached the exit, he paused. He looked back at them, at the woman clutching the boy close, her face a silent plea for protection. He didn't utter a sound, but the message was clear, understood by everyone in the room. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The air in the cafe was thick, almost suffocating, filled with unspoken threats and a sense of impending doom. He disappeared into the rainy night, leaving behind a tension that felt almost physical. The woman stared at the black rose on the table, its dark petals a stark contrast to the innocent, colorful drawing the boy still held in his small hand. The boy, oblivious to the storm that had just passed, looked up at his mother. "Mommy," he asked, "who was that daddy?" Her silence was the only answer. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. The vibrant Korean-American community in Los Angeles was a world unto itself, a place where tradition met ambition on sun-drenched streets. I grew up there, a young man driven by a restless energy but also weighed down by the heavy expectations of my family. My parents had come to America with little more than hope, instilling in me a relentless work ethic and a deep respect for the ways of our ancestors. Every decision I made felt like it carried the weight of their sacrifices. Koreatown was more than just a neighborhood. It was a living, breathing entity. The scent of kimchi and grilling meat always hung in the air, mixing with the murmur of Korean conversations and the constant buzz of commerce. Family was everything here, the cornerstone of our lives. Community gatherings, from festivals to funerals, reinforced the unspoken rules that governed our social interactions. You learned early on about hierarchy, about obligation, about saving face. The pressure to succeed, not just for yourself, but for the family's honor, was immense. It was a constant hum beneath the surface of everyday life. My relationship with my parents was built on a foundation of unspoken understanding and mutual respect. They rarely had to ask me to do something. I simply knew what was expected. My father ran a small import business, and I spent my afternoons after school helping him, learning the ropes, translating documents, and dealing with suppliers. My mornings were dedicated to my studies, pushing myself to excel, to live up to the future they envisioned for me. Their hopes for my future were a heavy cloak, warm but also restrictive. I appreciated their sacrifices, of course, but sometimes I felt like I was living a life already planned out for me, with no room for my own detours. Navigating two cultures was a constant dance. At home, it was Korean, with all the traditions and formalities. Outside, it was American, with its emphasis on individuality and freedom. I often felt caught in the middle, trying to balance the two, trying to conform to both, while secretly yearning to forge my own path. Beneath the surface of my determined exterior, I carried a hidden vulnerability, a deep-seated fear of failure. The idea of disappointing my parents, of not living up to their dreams, was a constant shadow. And sometimes, in the quiet moments, I longed for something simpler, a genuine connection that didn't come with a long list of expectations. It was during this time, in my early 20s, that Jae-hoon entered my life. He was older, maybe 10 years my senior, already a known figure in the community. He had a charisma that drew people in, a smile that seemed to promise opportunity. But even then, there were whispers about him, a shadowy reputation that hinted at things just beneath the surface of his polished exterior. When we first met, he seemed like a mentor, someone who saw potential in me that others didn't. He offered advice, business connections, and a sense of belonging to a more powerful circle. He spoke of growth, of expanding my father's business, of making a real name for myself. He made me feel seen, valued. I, seeking acceptance and success, eager to prove myself, found myself slowly being drawn into his world. He had a way of making everything sound exciting, like an adventure. He spoke of shortcuts, of ways to bypass the usual struggles, always with a knowing look. I was young, ambitious, and perhaps a little naive. I wanted to succeed, to make my family proud, and Jae-hoon seemed to hold the key to a faster, brighter future. He wasn't overtly criminal at first. He was just a powerful acquaintance, a man who seemed to know how to get things done, even if his methods were a little unconventional. Looking back, I can see how subtly he began to pull me in, using my aspirations against me, setting the stage for everything that was to come. The memories now surfaced, sharp and unwelcome, like shards of glass. Looking back, I could see the cracks forming early, the slow erosion of trust between Jae-hoon and me. At first, his manipulative nature was hidden behind what seemed like genuine help or valuable advice. He'd suggest a new supplier for my father's business, one that offered a slightly better price, but then he'd insist on handling the negotiations himself, taking a cut I didn't fully understand. He'd frame it as him greasing the wheels for me, making things easier. I, still green, just nodded along, grateful for the perceived assistance. Then came the broken promises. He once assured me a large delivery of specialty goods would arrive on time for a major community event. My father had already taken pre-orders, and our reputation was on the line. Jae-hoon had promised it was a sure thing, even shaking my hand on it. But the shipment was delayed, then partially lost, and finally arrived days late, incomplete. He just shrugged it off, blaming external factors, saying, "These things happen." It left my father scrambling, losing money and face, and me feeling helpless and foolish. Each time he failed to deliver, always with a plausible excuse, a little piece of my faith in him chipped away. It wasn't just about money. It was about the respect my family had earned, the trust we had built. The veiled humiliations were harder to pinpoint at first because they were so subtle, so interwoven with the hierarchical social structure of our community. At gatherings, Jae-hoon would often make a comment, seemingly lighthearted, about my youth or my inexperience. "Our young friend here is still learning the ropes," he'd say, a smirk playing on his lips, while everyone else chuckled politely. Or, "He has good intentions, but he still needs guidance." It wasn't direct insults, but it was enough to make me feel small, to remind everyone that I was still beneath him. It was a constant assertion of his dominance, always masked as playful banter or constructive criticism, making it impossible to fight back without seeming disrespectful. He knew how to use the community's unspoken rules against me, making me feel like I was the one out of line if I ever pushed back. His manipulation tactics were masterful. He knew my aspirations, my desire to make my parents proud, and he used them like levers. He'd come to me with a great opportunity that required a significant investment, hinting that it was a chance to finally step out of my father's shadow and show my own capabilities. He knew I valued loyalty and tradition, so he'd often appeal to those very things, saying, "You wouldn't want to let down the community, would you? This benefits all of us." He leveraged my family obligations, my cultural respect for elders, to coerce me into situations that benefited him far more than they ever did me. I found myself agreeing to things, doing favors, making decisions I wasn't comfortable with, all because he made me feel like I had no other choice, like it was my duty. There were so many moments of injustice, small and large, where Jae-hoon benefited directly at my expense. He once convinced me to invest a large sum, money I'd saved from years of hard work, into a venture he claimed was a guaranteed success. The venture failed mysteriously, and my money disappeared. Jae-hoon, of course, walked away unscathed, claiming he'd lost money too. But I knew better. That encounter in the cafe, with the black rose and the boy calling him daddy, wasn't just a sudden, shocking event. It was the culmination of years of calculated disrespect, emotional abuse, and a slow, insidious draining of my resources and spirit. It was the moment all those accumulated cracks finally became visible, exposing the true nature of the man I had once looked up to. The emotional atmosphere around me grew heavier, suffocating me slowly. I found myself increasingly caught in Jae-hoon's world, a world where the lines between legitimate business and something far darker blurred completely. It felt like I was sinking in quicksand, every movement just pulling me deeper into the criminal enterprise he controlled. There was no escape, or so it seemed at the time. Our disagreements became more frequent and much more heated. They weren't just about business anymore. They were about the ethical lines he kept crossing, lines I still believed in. I tried to push back, to resist his demands, but each attempt was met with more aggression, more thinly veiled threats. He would lean in close, his voice low and calm, yet somehow more menacing than any shout could be. He'd remind me of things, small favors he'd done for my family in the past, implying that these were debts I still owed, debts that could be called in at any moment. The pressure was constant, a weight on my chest that made it hard to breathe. The community, which had once been a source of comfort and belonging, now felt like a cage. People started to look at me differently. Whispers followed me in the market, in the restaurants, even at church. They knew I was associated with Jae-hoon, and his reputation, though powerful, was also tainted. Some avoided my gaze, others offered pitying looks, and a few, the ones who benefited from Jae-hoon's influence, gave me knowing glances that made my skin crawl. This scrutiny isolated me further, making me feel like an outcast even among my own people. I couldn't talk to my parents about it. They had sacrificed so much for me, and I couldn't bear to add to their worries or let them see how deeply I had fallen. Jae-hoon's demeanor, once charismatically manipulative, became overtly menacing and unpredictable. The charming smile he used to wear like a mask slipped more often, revealing the cold, calculating man underneath. He started to enjoy seeing me squirm, to watch me struggle with the impossible choices he laid before me. He would call me at odd hours, demanding I drop everything to meet him, or send his enforcers to check in on me, which was just another way of reminding me that I was being watched, that I was under his thumb. It wasn't just about business anymore. He started interfering in my personal life, making comments about my friends, my choices, even subtly suggesting who I should and shouldn't associate with. He was trying to control everything, to break me down completely. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread, a constant, gnawing fear that never left me. Every phone call, every unexpected knock on the door, sent a jolt of panic through me. I was always looking over my shoulder, wondering what Jae-hoon's next move would be, what new demand he would make, what new piece of my life he would try to seize. This period was the absolute worst. It was the peak of my emotional torment, a suffocating darkness that seemed to swallow everything good in my life. I was trapped, helpless, and the thought of breaking free seemed like an impossible dream, a dangerous fantasy that could cost me everything, even my life. The fear was a constant companion, a heavy cloak that I couldn't shed. I knew I was reaching a breaking point, but I didn't know what that would look like, or if I would survive it. The breaking point came, not as a sudden explosion, but as a chilling discovery that unraveled everything. It was late one night, a week after Jae-hoon had openly threatened my cousin over a minor debt. I was in his office, as usual, going through some files for him. He trusted me with a lot, ironically, or maybe he just liked showing off how much he controlled. I was looking for a specific contract, something about a new property development, when I stumbled upon a different folder, hidden away in a locked drawer he usually kept off limits. Curiosity, or perhaps a desperate need for answers, made me pick the lock. Inside, among some financial records I didn't recognize, was a photo. It was a picture of Jae-hoon, smiling, holding a baby. The baby was young, maybe a few months old, and had a small, distinct birthmark on his cheek. My blood ran cold because I knew that birthmark. I had seen it just days before, on the little boy in the cafe. The boy who had called Jae-hoon Daddy. But that wasn't the devastating part. The devastating part was the date stamped on the back of the photo. It was taken a year before Jae-hoon had even met the boy's mother, Maria. This wasn't just a casual fling. This was something much deeper, much more twisted. Then I found the adoption papers, tucked beneath the photo. They weren't fully processed, but they clearly showed Jae-hoon's name as the intended adoptive parent. The birth mother's name was listed as Kim Minji. I remembered Minji. She was Maria's younger sister, who had disappeared from the community years ago after a difficult time. Everyone had said she left town for a new start, but these papers showed she had given birth, and then, according to a separate, hastily written note, had signed over her parental rights to Jae-hoon under duress. The note mentioned a large sum of money, a debt that would be cleared if she gave up the child. And then, a few months later, Maria had come back to town, heartbroken, saying her sister had died in a car accident overseas. It all clicked into place with a sickening thud. Jae-hoon hadn't just met Maria and her son. He had orchestrated the entire situation, taking Maria's nephew, the child of her deceased sister, and somehow convinced Maria it was her own. He had intentionally put himself into Maria's life, using the boy as a pawn, knowing Maria would never leave her son. This wasn't just about money or power anymore. This was about a child, a family, and a betrayal so deep it made my stomach churn. Jae-hoon had lied to Maria, manipulated her grief, and essentially stolen her nephew, all to solidify his control over her. He had created this entire elaborate lie, and he was using that little boy, that innocent child, as leverage. The boy, oblivious, was living a lie, and Maria was trapped in a web of deceit. My own entanglement with Jae-hoon, my own suffering, suddenly felt secondary. This was a line he should never have crossed. This wasn't just a betrayal of me. It was a betrayal of basic human decency. A cold calm settled over me. The years of suppressed anger, the fear, the helplessness, it all coalesced into a single, unbreakable resolve. I would not let him get away with this. Maria and that boy deserved the truth, and Jae-hoon deserved to pay for what he had done. I knew exposing him would put my life, and potentially my family's, in extreme danger. But the thought of letting this injustice stand was unbearable. This was no longer just about me breaking free. It was about protecting the innocent. Jae-hoon, sensing my shift, became even more volatile. He started sending veiled threats about my parents' small grocery store, about accidents that could happen. He even had one of his men follow my younger sister for a day, just to make sure I got the message. He was pushing me to the absolute brink, trying to break my spirit entirely. But his threats only solidified my decision. I had to act, and I had to be smart about it. Had to be. Then, an unexpected opportunity arose. During one of my desperate searches for anything that could help me, I had made contact with a former associate of Jae-hoon's, a man named Mr. Han, who had been pushed out of the organization years ago. He was a quiet, unassuming man, now running a small dry cleaning business. He had always seemed to watch me with a strange understanding. I had gone to him out of pure desperation, hoping he might know something, anything. I didn't expect him to offer help, let alone a way out. He had seen the fear in my eyes, the same fear he once carried. He told me he had been quietly gathering evidence against Jae-hoon for years, waiting for the right moment, for someone brave enough to stand with him. He had documents, recordings, and contacts within certain circles that Jae-hoon had wronged. He saw in me the chance to finally expose Jae-hoon. This was it. This was my path. The immediate aftermath of discovering Jae-hoon's monstrous deception hit me like a physical blow. A wave of nausea washed over me, followed by a profound grief for Maria and that innocent boy whose life was built on such a cruel lie. Anger, cold and sharp, ignited within me, burning away the last vestiges of my fear. But beneath it all, a defiant courage began to simmer. I had spent years feeling trapped, But now, the path forward, though terrifying, felt clear. The weight of my decision to expose Jae-hoon was immense. I knew what I was getting into, but there was no turning back. Intense self-doubt gnawed at me in the quiet hours of the night. Could I really take on someone as powerful and ruthless as Jae-hoon? The thought of my family, especially my younger sister, being caught in the crossfire, sent shivers down my spine. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every unfamiliar car, a potential danger. The magnitude of challenging a figure who controlled so much, who had such deep ties, became starkly real. There were moments I questioned my sanity, wondering if it would just be easier to disappear, to let Jae-hoon continue his reign of terror. But then I pictured Maria's trusting eyes, the boy's innocent smile, and the doubt receded. The shame of my past association with Jae-hoon, the years I had spent enabling him, even indirectly, erupted in a silent, internal explosion. I locked myself in my room for a day, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every subtle manipulation, every time I had ignored my gut feeling. I felt dirty, complicit. The anger I had reserved for Jae-hoon now turned inward, a crushing weight of self-reproach. How could I have been so blind, so naive, so weak? This intense introspection was a necessary cleansing, a painful but vital step towards reclaiming my own agency. It was during this period that I truly understood the depth of my own emotional scars. The reactions of those around me were a mixed bag, a clear reflection of the fear Jae-hoon commanded. My parents, after I carefully explained parts of the situation, offered unwavering support. My mother, usually so gentle, became a fierce protectress. Her eyes hardened with a resolve I hadn't seen before. My father, a man of few words, simply nodded and said, "We stand with you." They were my anchors, my unexpected allies in this storm. But others in the community, friends and acquaintances I had known for years, began to distance themselves. The whispers started almost immediately. Some gave me pitying looks, others hostile glares, as if I were bringing trouble to their doorstep. They feared Jae-hoon more than they valued loyalty or truth. The cultural dynamics of the Korean-American community played a significant role in how everything unfolded. Gossip spread like wildfire through the tight-knit social networks, carried between grocery stores, churches, and community centers. Judgments were passed, not always openly, but through sidelong glances and hushed conversations. Honor and shame were powerful forces. To challenge Jae-hoon, a man who had cultivated an image of success and power, was seen by some as a profound disrespect, an act that could bring shame upon my family. This added another layer of pressure, a communal weight on my already burdened shoulders. The fear of ostracization was real, but it paled in comparison to the injustice I was fighting. The psychological impact on me was immense. Sleepless nights became the norm, my mind racing with strategies, fears, and the replay of past betrayals. Anxiety was a constant companion, a knot in my stomach that never truly loosened. Every phone call, every knock on the door, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I was constantly aware of the danger, the ever-present threat that Jae-hoon could retaliate at any moment. Yet, amidst this torment, a growing resolve solidified. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice. The arduous journey of healing had begun, marked by the deep emotional scars of my past, but also by an unshakable determination to expose the truth. Reconstruction was a slow, painful climb. It wasn't just about taking down Jae-hoon. It was about piecing myself back together. I worked relentlessly, gathering every piece of evidence, every witness statement, every financial record that exposed his network. It meant late nights, constant fear, and the gnawing anxiety that I might fail or worse, put my family in even greater danger. But with every shred of truth I uncovered, a piece of myself healed. I wasn't just fighting Jaehoon anymore. I was fighting for the person I wanted to be, the person I should have been all along. The legal process was convoluted, a maze of technicalities and delays. But I pushed through, driven by the memory of Maria's fear and the boy's innocent face. Jaehoon's downfall wasn't a sudden crash, but a slow, public unraveling. The combined weight of evidence I presented, coupled with investigations into his more violent activities, exposed him for what he truly was. The legal system, slow as it was, eventually caught up. He faced charges not just for financial crimes, but for intimidation and a host of other illicit dealings. His carefully constructed image, the one that had fooled so many in the community, shattered. The headlines were brutal, detailing his rise and spectacular fall. The power he wielded, built on fear and manipulation, crumbled under the harsh light of truth. He lost everything: his businesses, his reputation, and his freedom. The poetic justice was undeniable. The man who thrived on controlling others was now utterly powerless. The resolution wasn't a Hollywood ending, but it was real. I found a measure of peace. Maria and the boy, whose real name was David, moved away from Los Angeles, far from the shadows of the past. We kept in touch, a quiet understanding binding us. I saw David occasionally, a bright, curious child, completely unaware of the storm his innocent question had stirred. Maria was stronger now, slowly rebuilding her life, free from the constant threat. My own life changed profoundly. I sold my share of the family business, redirecting my energy towards something more meaningful, something that helped people rather than exploited them. It was a smaller life, perhaps, but it was mine, free from the dark influence that had once consumed me. Reflecting on my journey, I understood the profound lessons learned. The pain was immense, the cost high, but the liberation was immeasurable. I learned that true strength isn't about power or control, but about resilience, integrity, and the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it feels impossible. I learned that silence can be a weapon, but also a cage. Breaking free from Jaehoon's grip wasn't just about escaping a criminal. It was about reclaiming my identity, shedding the layers of fear and complicity that had defined me for too long. The black rose from that rainy night, once a symbol of menace, now felt different. It still held the memory of fear, but also the beginning of my defiance, the catalyst for a radical shift in my life. It reminded me that even in the darkest moments, a single act of courage can change everything, leading to a profound sense of self-worth and a future finally, truly my own. The scars remained, but they were no longer wounds. They were reminders of where I had been and how far I had come.